Hello, everyone around the world, depending on where you are. My usual greeting of good afternoon, good evening, or good night, wherever you are. Uh, let's go a little Truman Show here. Today we have Nathan Whitaker on, and he's going to talk to us about how cybersecurity is more of a consistent issue with CEOs. So how do you talk about that as a core value to your MSP without without boring the crap out of your client? So Nathan, tell me a little bit about who you are, a little bit about yourself, and then let's get into this topic.
Well, I'm really excited to talk to you about it, Adam, and talk to everybody here. So, welcome. I'm excited to be here. A little bit about me. Started Stimulus Technologies in 1995 with my brother and my dad. And so, been operating IT service company for almost 30 years now. My background is in computer science, a bachelor's and master's degree in computer science. Background in software development, but focus on IT services. And that's, a company serves SMB and lower middle market companies across 5 states where we operate, mostly in the Western US.
Now, I just want to call out really quick. I'm doing a new thing here where I poke into your personal life.
Sure.
I see that you're also doing something with the Desert Flying Club.
I do. So I'm a private pilot, and about, I guess it's almost 11 years ago now, I was one of the founders of Desert Flying Club, which is, a club based here in Las Vegas where I live, that we rent planes, have member flyouts, do flight training, and just have, a lot of fun with aircraft. So we have about 200 members, and just a passion of mine. So.
And then you've also written a book, correct?
I have. So we published it about a year and a half ago. It's called the CEO's Digital Survival Guide. And the impetus for the book is, I think what we're going to talk about today is, speaking better to C-level executives or small business owners about technology and cybersecurity in ways that they can understand.
Yeah. I'm also giving a talk on this in February at Start Grow Manage's event. Shameless plug for that. Those guys are awesome, Jeff Lohr and friends over there. But it's an important topic, though, right? I was in cybersecurity for a long time. Let's just say it that way. I also have a Bachelor of Science in Computer Science, and I ended up being an engineer for a number of years. I climbed my way through management, and I ended up as a critical infrastructure director for a long time, which means I just made a lot of policy and shook my head a lot. But a lot of it was, how do you explain to the CEO in terms that they understand what's going on? And a lot of times people are they're fear mongering. It seems to be very popular. Strike fear into their hearts. Tell them all the cool cybersecurity stories you know about companies going bankrupt. Is this the correct way to do things, or is there a better way to have a conversation with the client?
Well, I could take the words out of your mouth and put it in mine. That's when I speak to groups of individuals, keynote speech, that's how I started out. I started out talking about why aren't businesses implementing these technologies correctly inside their business when you turn on the nightly news or you pull up the headlines and it's every week it's a large enterprise being hacked and losing millions or billions of dollars. And the ones that don't get reported are the small to mid-sized businesses that don't make the news, but it's almost more devastating for those companies because a lot of times they don't survive past a major attack. And, that's where most of our clients are. And how do we change the conversation from fear mongering and from this perspective that cyber defense is just an expense line on their P&L statement that they don't want to have to pay for? It's like buying insurance. I think a lot of people wouldn't buy insurance if they didn't have to.
Unless it was
Uh,
required by law.
yeah, we
No
had to make it
liability
required by
insurance. I'm
law.
covered, right?
And so, and it's almost now with the insurance companies enforcing better cyber hygiene inside of companies because they're realizing people have not been implementing the right technologies. So to even get insurance today, it's a lot more difficult. But it's fear mongering. It's this whole concept is, the things are going to come crashing down, and your business is going to go under if you don't do this stuff. And they say, I've been in business for 20 years or 50 years and I've never had to implement these tools. Why should I do so now?
Yeah.
And, we throw out acronyms that people don't understand, and it's just it leads to a difficult conversation.
Yeah, I want to hit upon that. You had mentioned that a little bit in our prep time here, and calling out this idea of high context conversations. And what that means is if you ever work for the government, you'll know exactly what I mean on your first day in there. Like my advice was given to me was, hey, if you are a government worker, just let the acronyms flow over you. Eventually you'll get them. The context that we use in cybersecurity is the same. Like we tend to use a lot of things that are in our vernacular on a day-to-day basis that are not in a CEO's line, but they have a whole set of words that they use and that they understand that you would love to know more about. It's just these are what we call high context conversations. If I talk to a cybersecurity professional about DLP, they know exactly what I'm talking about, can cite several companies that do it and several flaws to it, as well as the threat management that goes along with it. If I say DLP to a CEO, they're going to give me a blank stare. They're a
Mm-hmm.
smart person, but they don't get it. And so you talk really fast as a cybersecurity person, and you're just washing over this intelligent human being that's across the table from you, but you're not relating to them. So tell me a little bit about how do you get out of that? We're using acronyms, we're using verbiage that the client doesn't understand. How do we get into a CEO mindset? How do I relate to the CEO across the table from me?
Well, especially, in SMB or lower middle market businesses, they're very sensitive to profits, to, talking about their net income, but also gross margins. And, those are conversations. So the starters for them is like, how are we going to either, retain the revenue and profit of the company? How do we increase productivity of the team members of the company? And how do we ensure that the work that you're doing and providing to clients can continue in perpetuity? And those are the conversations
Yeah.
you need to start with, rather than talking about, oh, we need to implement 2FA or, an MDR, zero trust. Those are, again, like you said, they gloss over and they don't understand. And a lot of times these conversations about cybersecurity, it sounds like it's going to slow down operations. It's going to cut into the profits and margins of the business. I really like the book. I don't know if you've ever read it, the Phoenix Project.
Okay.
And they talk about there that the security team, even for these IT projects, are the big bottleneck. And it's often the case. There's always this question about security slowing things down, decreasing productivity, hurting the business. And the conversation needs to change, of understanding that these tools and these technologies and techniques that we're implementing actually enhance the company and lead to potentially higher margins, better contracts, and not just checking boxes on attestations or compliance attestations. It's about really improving the way the business functions.
Yeah, I mean, an example I have is like at Humanize IT, we have our SOC 2 certification, right? It
Mm-hmm.
should be just we got this, but we took it seriously. So when I talk to a potential client, I'm actually coming across as more professional and a higher level of confidence there because we've actually gone through and looked at our own practices and processes and had them audited by a third party company. And you can see what we do. If we're taking this much care in our non required areas, what are we going to do about the product of ours that you're using? What about our relationship? Are we going to put the same amount of care or more into that? So I think an aspect of cybersecurity that often gets overlooked is the consumer confidence side. When you see the care that somebody puts into a SIP or a NIST or a SOC 2, this is a professional company. This isn't a fly by night person just kind of making stuff up as they go. This is somebody who's thought out their product, what the issues are with it, how it's going to affect their customers, and where are they going. So I feel like when you're talking to the CEO about cybersecurity, if you can say, this is how you're presenting to your clients, this is the confidence level you're going to increase if you go through either a compliance initiative or a security pen test, you're going to have this thing that you can say, we actually do pen tests. We test ourselves. We make sure we're following through on our policies. And now the client can say, oh, versus Bob down the street, you're way more professional. And you're also reducing risk. There's all those side benefits to it. But also, there's that consumer confidence that a lot of people just kind of miss when it comes to cybersecurity because they're too busy talking about 2FA. They're too busy talking about all the technical specifics of cybersecurity. And as you said, not the business benefits. What are we getting out of this? And so when I worked for corporate world, my biggest successes in cybersecurity were when I allowed people to be lazier, right? We had a password policy. You had to switch passwords every, I think it was 30 or 60 days. And that was by a compliance initiative. And so I looked into compliance and I thought, why is it that way? Well, it's because our passwords at the time, this is a long time ago, were like 7-character minimum or maximum minimum. And so I was like, what if I moved it to 15? Well, that gets us by the standards of the entities we're doing business with. We could go out to 90 days. And so I talked to people like, hey, what if I required a 15-character password for you guys? And they're like, oh gosh, that'd be impossible to remember. I'm like, well, what if we did phrases instead? Where instead of thinking of it as a word, think of it in terms of a phrase that you can add some numbers and letters into. And they're like, oh, well, that'd be much easier. And so I had an optional policy people could opt into if their character password was over 15 characters, that I would let them rotate every 90 days. The entire organization switched within a month because they were so tired of swapping out their passwords. I increased security and I made things easier for all my users in one move. But I had to understand the problem from both the policy side and the company side so I could find a solution that improved everyone. And I think that's where a lot of people break down. So tell me a little bit more about that risk management and how do you make it not just an expense line where like, ugh, now I have to do this. Now I have to pay for this. How do we get to an area where we can talk to the company about how security is benefiting us and how it's going to help them grow?
I think we've touched on it a little bit already. As you become a more sophisticated organization, it goes across all areas of the business, even, sales and marketing, in production, in whatever areas of the business. It improves productivity. It improves the type of employees that want to work there because you're going to be a better company to work for. And then I think in the end, you can go after larger and better clients, saying that you have a SOC 2 certification and an external audit without, being an industry that requires it, like you said before, or, NIST or one of these other compliance mechanisms. It just garners a higher caliber client that you can go after, and it's in all industries. An ISO certification if you're in manufacturing, something like that. It just allows you to go after a better client, and a lot of these frameworks require enhanced cybersecurity, and so you can charge more in the talk. So when you're talking revenue, you say, wouldn't it be better to go after a client that's willing to pay more because you are a better company? You will have better technologies and routines, and you have better caliber of employees working for you. And it is not an expense because it's allowed you to grow your client base and grow the type of clients that you're going after. So it's a different conversation. So I think that's the perspective that you have to go after with companies, is say this is no longer in 2025 an option to implement cybersecurity. I think it's now a requirement to really protect your client data, protect your revenue, and really grow your business. The other thing, I think thinking about is the worst thing that can happen, and I don't usually go fear mongering, but the worst thing that can happen is, as you're talking about with customer experience, is having to send out a letter saying that your data was breached or you had some type of, confidential leak of data. And, anytime something negative happens to the company, you're going to potentially lose clients. And so, the worst thing that can happen is having to do that. and not have a good remediation plan for it. So, you know, protecting your client data, protecting your operations is essential to retaining your business going forward. And
Yeah.
that's where the conversation should go is, this is about, increasing your revenue, increasing your margins, but also retaining the hard-earned money and the clients that you do have by implementing the best policies across the organization.
Yeah, and I do want to lean into it a little bit. When you guys are talking about risk management, you need to understand what risk means to the CEO. And you cannot define that for them. You have to ask them. And in the corporate world, this is a data discovery process where we go through and we discover where our critical data is. And if you look at like any of the top 20 lists or anything like that, these are like, where are your assets? What are your critical assets? And this is a no-brainer for a security person. But when you're talking to the CEO, sometimes we throw that out, right? We forget to talk to them about, tell me about your company. What are your crown jewels? Please tell me about this. You've had this conversation so many times, you think that they just automatically know. And so we're talking about these high context conversations that we talked about earlier, where you assume that they have a level of knowledge that they really don't. And so asking this question of, please tell me the story of your company. Please tell me about where your critical assets are. Please tell me about your revenue streams so that I can take my knowledge as a cybersecurity professional and translate that into risk management strategy for you. Like, hey, did you know that those assets you have over there, those could easily be reached out to by your competitors or by a hacktivist or by, here are the actors that are out there we know are active. We can fix that pretty easily, and that mitigates that risk. And then you can talk from that standpoint, but you have to listen first, and you have to start learning their context, their language, what matters to them. So how do you do that? How do you learn a CEO's language?
Well, and I think it requires some digging because this is a conversation a CEO isn't used to having. They're used to just a proposal sitting in front of them of, this is what we'll do for you. These are the, 10 options of, or services that we offer or products that we sell you. And so those questions are very interesting. And I think it takes, like you were saying, a bit of digging. Because a lot of, especially again, dealing with small businesses, a lot of them say, I really don't have anything that I need to protect. I just, service HVAC equipment and that's all we do. We just go out, service the equipment, we sell some stuff and that's our business. But when you start digging into it, every business has a secret sauce, a secret way of operating the company. And that's what you have to dig into. It might be just a client list is one of the most important things to them, or it may be a vendor relationship that they have that they need to protect,
Yeah.
or maybe the pricing that they get from a vendor that's their secret sauce. And so that's maybe the question you ask. What makes you different than your competitor? How do you beat your competitors in the market? What is special about your business? And those kind of conversations, I think, dig into the thoughts about the CEO, that the CEO can answer those questions. And then, you identify those assets they have, whether it's a, customer list, maybe proprietary way of operating businesses, processes, helping companies document their processes effectively. So those are the conversations that CEOs understand is really, asking them how they compete in the market
Yeah.
and what assets allow them to do that. I just a story this morning I was reading. Somebody in our industry was talking about an MSP that they had an employee that left, a disgruntled employee, took their client list, started marketing to their clients, and this MSP is potentially losing half their business because this employee left. And they're talking about getting attorneys involved and things like that. But how do you protect the client list and the way that you operate in those relationships and ensure that in the end that that business stays with you and you can protect that? And that's again, that's an operational question. It's also a cybersecurity question: is how do you protect those assets from leaving your business?
Yeah, and I have a story I usually tell about this where I was talking about some assets we had, and the term PII came up. And I said, look, technically this doesn't count as PII by state legislation. However, it could be misconstrued as PII because it has these identifiers in it. And we're sending this out plain text. Now, it's accessible via plain text so that people can pull this and get this information. Now, this may not be a big deal, but I'd like to secure this channel so that people can't just come in and scrape all this information and start reaching out to your clients. And they're like, well, it's not a big deal. It's not really PII. I'm like, okay, if that's the case, I have this piece of paper. I want you to accept the risk and sign the paper. And I'm okay with that. You can accept the risk. But when the newspaper asks me, how did this person get all this information? I'm going to say Susan signed off on this as an acceptable risk. And the newspaper can talk to you instead. and, you know, and it changed the mind of the risk when all of a sudden they realized that they will be accepting a personal thing. And so it wasn't that I was trying to threaten or trying to fearmonger. I was just letting them know what kind of risk they were accepting, what this meant. Like, it's okay. This is your call. Just understand I have told you what the issue is going to be. I've told you the solution. It's going to take us about 3 hours to put the solution in place. It's just a matter of, do you want this to be, do you want to accept this risk? And then they started thinking, okay. And then, oh, by the way, while we're improving this TLS transaction, we can actually probably automate it now. So it's a lot smoother. And they're like, oh, well, that's nice. And so we actually went down that route. Yes, it took them an extra half day to get their job done. But then from then on, they had an automation process in place. And
Yeah, and it
they had a
improved.
higher level of security where they didn't have that vulnerability anymore. And it was all about having a better conversation. I really didn't understand what they were doing with this information. Not completely. They did. And they wanted to get their job done. It's all they wanted to do. They were a good hard worker that wanted to get their job done, but all I do is explain it in context of, here's what's going to happen if you accept this risk. It may never happen. And if you're willing to take that bet, that's on you. But know that when the newspaper comes calling, saying, how did they get all these people's information? This is the breach. This is where they went. So when I do my breach report as a cybersecurity professional, this is what it's going to say. And that changes things. And so I do recommend that when you're selling these cybersecurity principles, that you're actually trying to find a way to create an efficiency with them that helps them with their crown jewels or the assets that Nathan was mentioning earlier, that improves a process. Is there a chance while doing this MFA service or while doing this increased security protocol, we can add some efficiencies in here? And if the answer is yes, now you can sell cybersecurity because businesses will be reducing risk and increasing profit through efficiency. You've just hit the two things that businesses care about: profit and profitability. I'm sorry,
Mm-hmm.
risk reduction and
Profit. Yeah.
profitability.
Yeah, and that's and it's got to go in that order. Is they're focused on profit first? I mean, we can't just focus on risk reduction. People, again, like we started the conversation. The government had to force us to buy car insurance. It's not something that there's a certain percent of the population that would have gone out and bought it regardless of the government mandate. But you got to start with that conversation. This is going to increase productivity and then drive money to the bottom line. And
Yeah.
then in the end, we're going to be able to keep that by reducing your risk of
Yeah.
exposure. And that's the road to that conversation of having with executives.
Yeah, definitely. So, any final thoughts here, Nathan, before we sign off for the day?
I think, yeah, I talk about this as a culture inside the organization, building a cybersecurity culture, and I think that's an important additional conversation. Is anything that we can do inside the business to create this culture of, rather than fighting against cybersecurity, fighting against these extra steps we have to take, is build it into the culture of the organization that we're going to enhance our customer experience, enhance our way of doing work, inside the business, making it secure. And that's the way that we operate inside the business. And it just makes the companies significantly better. So as us as MSPs, as IT professionals, if we can take that conversation to our clients, of talking about that change of culture, change of mindset will in, level up the conversation with those executives.
Yes, definitely. See the person across the table, understand what they care about, and try to empathize would be my final thoughts on this. Thanks for coming on, Nathan. This has been a great conversation. I really want to have you on again, so we can definitely work something out. I hope everybody's. I think I've coordinated this podcast well enough to get it to launch the same week I'm talking about how to sell security at Start Grow Manage in New York, and I really want people to focus on that. Don't scare your clients. Work with them. Help work in their context so that everybody wins. We can make this world a little bit more secure, and we can make the world a little bit better day by day. Please like and subscribe us. You know where we are. Click that button. Leave us a review. Always looking for more reviews. That helps small podcasts like this rise to the top over the big corporate ones, so you can keep having great conversations with people like Nathan and other MSPs out there. Thanks, Nathan. We'll see you later.
Thanks, Adam. It's great to be here.